March 12, 1944, 8:19 a.m., Deinfurth Chemical Plant, Germany. Corporal Eric Weber stood in a sealed rubber suit, his gloved hands trembling as he lifted a glass vial. The 22-year-old infantry conscript's breath echoed inside his gas mask, fogging the viewport. The vial held 5 milliliters of clear, odorless liquid. Tabun, Nazi Germany's first mass-produced nerve gas. The scientist in a white lab coat leaned in, pointing to a marked line on the vial. Weber poured the liquid into a stainless steel test chamber. Seconds later, the caged rabbit inside convulsed, its legs thrashing wildly before it went limp. Weber looked away, his gloved fingers pressing into the chamber's metal edge. He'd seen this exact sequence 17 times in 2 weeks. Each time, the horror didn't fade. This wasn't a weapon. It was a force of nature, unpredictable, unforgiving, and deadly to anyone who crossed its path, friend or foe. The Tabun Weber handled that morning was a culmination of Nazi Germany's most secretive chemical weapons program, Program 9. Its origins traced not to a military lab, but to a corporate research facility. In 1936, Gerhard Schrader, a 36-year-old chemist at IG Farben, the conglomerate that dominated Germany's chemical industry, was tasked with developing a new insecticide to protect crops from beetle infestations. Schrader's team worked in a lab in Leverkusen, mixing phosphorus compounds and organic chemicals in search of a formula that would disrupt insect nervous systems. On December 23, 1936, they synthesized a compound they labeled J, later renamed Tabun. When a lab assistant accidentally spilled a drop on his glove, he began sweating profusely, his vision blurred, and his muscles twitched uncontrollably. Schrader rushed him to a hospital, where doctors barely saved his life. The chemist immediately recognized GA's potential. This was an insecticide. It was a weapon more powerful than any chemical used in World War I. Schrader reported his discovery to the German Army's Chemical Warfare Service, CW Service, in January 1937. The CW Service, led by Major General Walter Schnell, a 48-year-old veteran of chemical warfare in World War I, had been searching for a breakthrough weapon to overcome enemy defenses. Schnell saw Tabun as the answer. Mustard gas, the standard chemical weapon of World War I, caused painful burns but took hours or days to kill. Chlorine gas could be blocked by basic gas masks. Tabun was different. It was invisible, odorless, and could penetrate most gas mask filters. A single drop on the skin, if not washed off within 30 seconds, would disable the enzyme acetylcholinesterase, critical for controlling muscle function. Victims would suffer violent convulsions, respiratory failure, and death within minutes. Schnell classified the project top secret and ordered IG Farben to scale up production. The first challenge was building a facility capable of manufacturing Tabun safely. The CW service chose Deinfurth, a small town 100 miles east of Berlin, now Brzeg-Dolny, Poland, for its remote location and access to rail lines that could transport raw materials and finished weapons. Construction began in 1938, using forced labor from nearby concentration camps, mostly Polish Jews and Soviet prisoners of war. The laborers dug 30-foot deep foundations for steel reactors, assembled lead-line storage tanks, and built a network of underground pipes to move chemicals between buildings. By 1940, the plant employed 2,500 workers, 80% of whom were prisoners. Guards patrolled the perimeter with machine guns, and barbed wire fences topped with electric current surrounded the site. Signs posted at the gates read, "Trespassers will be shot on sight." Synthesizing Tabun on an industrial scale was a nightmare of complexity and danger. The process required 3 precise steps, each with catastrophic risks. First, workers combined dimethylamine, a pungent, flammable gas, with phosphorus oxychloride, a corrosive liquid that burns skin on contact. This reaction produced compound A, a thick, yellowish paste that had to be kept at exactly 68 degrees Fahrenheit to prevent explosion. Second, compound A was mixed with potassium cyanide, lethal if inhaled in even tiny amounts, to form compound B, a volatile liquid that could ignite from a single spark. Third, ethanol was added to compound B, triggering a final reaction that produced pure debun. Each step had to be monitored by scientists in full protective gear, as even a 1% deviation in temperature or chemical ratio could destroy the batch or kill everyone in the room. The first production run in April 1940 yielded 500 pounds of debun. It was stored in lead-lined steel drums, each labeled insecticide, handled with care to disguise its true purpose. But the run revealed flaws. The debun was unstable. After 2 months in storage, it decomposed into a toxic sludge that corroded the drums. It also reacted with standard steel artillery shells, so the CW service ordered shells lined with lead to prevent leaks. Worse, the production process was slow. IG Farben's target was 10 tons per month, but the plant struggled to produce 3 tons. Raw materials were scarce. Phosphorus oxychloride came from occupied Poland's mines, potassium cyanide from Czechoslovakian factories, and ethanol from French vineyards, all sources vulnerable to Allied bombing. By 1941, Schnell was threatening IG Farben executives with concentration camp assignments if they didn't boost output. The plan added a second production line, but the new line's debun was only 89% pure, requiring 30% more liquid to achieve a lethal dose. Weaponizing debun presented another set of problems. The German army wanted to deliver via 3 methods: artillery shells, aerial bombs, and infantry spray canisters. Artillery shells needed a thick lead lining and a rubber gasket to seal the liquid inside. Tests showed that a 150 millimeter shell filled with debun could cover a 100-yard radius with lethal gas when detonated 10 feet above ground. Aerial bombs required delayed fuse to ensure they exploded mid-air, spreading the gas as an aerosol. The first bomb test in July 1941, at a range near Magdeburg, destroyed a mock enemy bunker. All 20 test dummies inside showed lethal exposure within 90 seconds, even though they wore standard gas masks. Infantry spray canisters were the most problematic. The canisters, modeled after fire extinguishers, used a hand pump to atomize debun into a mist. But the mist was visible in sunlight, giving away the user's position. Worse, the canisters leaked if dropped, putting infantry at risk of accidental exposure. The first field test involving live soldiers took place in September 1941. A company of the 21st Infantry Division was ordered to simulate an attack using debun spray canisters against a friendly bunker occupied by other German troops, equipped with gas masks. The exercise descended into chaos. A private tripped while carrying a canister, which leaked debun onto his leg. He collapsed within 45 seconds, convulsing. Medics injected him with atropine, the only known antidote to nerve gas, and rushed him to a hospital. He survived but suffered permanent tremors in his hands. 2 other soldiers developed mild symptoms after their gas masks filters failed. The test was deemed a partial success, but the soldiers' fear was palpable. Private Hans Muller, who witnessed the incident, wrote in his diary, "We were told this gas would win the war. Today, I saw it nearly kill one of our own. I sleep with my gas mask next to my bed now. I don't trust the weapon. I don't trust the officers who ordered us to use it. Schrader's team, meanwhile, was already working on a better nerve gas. In 1940, they synthesized GB, later named sarin, an acronym for creators: Schrader, Ambrose, Rudiger, and van der Linde. Sarin was twice as toxic as Tabun, more stable in storage, and easier to produce. A single drop on the skin killed in 60 seconds. Inhaling its vapor killed in 30. The CW service prioritized sarin production, building a new plant at Spandau on Berlin's western edge in 1943. But sarin had its own dangers. It was highly volatile. Static electricity from a soldier's uniform could ignite it. In March 1944, a sarin leak at Spandau caused an explosion that killed 5 workers and injured 23 more. The plant was shut down for 3 weeks, and production fell behind schedule. By 1943, Nazi Germany had stockpiled 12,000 tons of tabun and 2,500 tons of sarin, enough to kill every person in Europe twice over. The weapons were stored in 12 concrete bunkers across Germany and occupied territories. Each bunker was 50 feet underground, lined with lead, and equipped with air filtration systems that scrubbed tabun fumes from the air. Guards were hand-picked from the SS, trained to recognize nerve gas symptoms, pinpoint pupils, excessive salivation, muscle twitches, and carry atropine injectors in thigh holsters. But even with training, the guards lived in constant fear. The bunker at Breslau, now Wrocław, Poland, had a rule: no one entered without a buddy, and both carried 2 injectors. In December 1943, a guard named Otto Becker noticed a small leak in a drum of tabun. He and his buddy evacuated the bunker, but Becker had already inhaled small amounts of vapor. He spent a week in the hospital, his lungs burned by the gas. "I still cough when it rains," he later told interrogators. "That gas gets into your bones." The question of whether to use tabun haunted Nazi leaders. In November 1942, during the Battle of Stalingrad, Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus begged Hitler for permission to use tabun artillery shells against Soviet forces surrounding his army. Paulus argued that a single artillery barrage could break the siege, saving 250,000 German soldiers. Hitler refused. He feared the Allies would retaliate with their own chemical weapons, a fear based on flawed intelligence that claimed the U.S. and Britain had already developed nerve gases they hadn't. In July 1943, during the Allied invasion of Sicily, Mussolini asked Hitler to send tabun bombs to Italian forces. Again, Hitler refused. He worried that using chemical weapons would turn neutral countries like Sweden and Switzerland against the Axis, cutting off critical supplies of iron, ore, and banking services. The closest tabun came to combat use was during D-Day. In May 1944, the CW service drew up Operation Herbstable Autumn Mist, a plan to fire 500 tabun-laden artillery shells at Allied troops as they landed on Omaha and Utah beaches. The shells were stockpiled at a bunker near Cannes, and artillery units were trained to fire them within 10 minutes of the first landing craft hitting the shore. Hitler approved the plan, but insisted on giving the final order personally. On June 6, 1944, as Allied soldiers waded to the surf under German fire, the artillery units waited. The order never came. Hitler, holed up in his bunker in East Prussia, hesitated. He worried that using tabun would lead to Allied chemical attacks on German cities. By the time he finally decided to cancel the order, Allied troops had already secured a beachhead. The tabun shells were later destroyed to prevent capture. Back at Dierenfurth, conditions deteriorated as the war turned against Germany. Allied bombers began targeting chemical plants in 1943, forcing the plant to operate at night. Workers, most of whom were concentration camp prisoners, were given minimal protection. Cloth masks instead of rubber suits, and thin gloves that leaked after an hour of use. Accidents became common. In August 1943, a phosphorus oxychloride tank exploded, killing 12 prisoners and burning 30 more. The bodies were cremated the same day, and the incident was erased from plant records. In January 1944, a prisoner named Jacob Cohen, who had been a chemist in Warsaw before the war, tried to sabotage a production run by adding extra ethanol to a batch of tabun. The batch exploded, killing 3 guards, but Cohen was caught and executed by a firing squad. His death was used as a warning. Sabotage of war materials means death. Corporal Weber, who had been conscripted into the infantry in 1943 after his Berlin factory was bombed, was transferred to Dyrenforth in February 1944. His job was to assist scientists in testing tabun's effectiveness. He fed rabbits and guinea pigs into test chambers, recorded how long it took them to die, and cleaned the chambers afterward, scrubbing the walls with bleach to remove traces of the gas. He saw prisoners collapse from exposure, their bodies racked with convulsions. He saw guards shoot prisoners who moved too slowly. He began having nightmares. He'd wake up screaming, convinced his skin was burning. "I wasn't a soldier anymore," he later said. "I was a janitor in a death factory. Every day, I wondered if I'd be the next one to drop." As Soviet forces advanced west in early 1945, the Nazis ordered the Dyrenforth plant destroyed. Workers were told to dump tabun into the Oder River and burn all production records. But the destruction was haphazard. Some drums were buried in fields. Others were left in bunkers, their lids loose. On January 25, 1945, a Soviet tank unit stumbled upon a hidden bunker near Breslau. The soldiers, curious about the lead line drums inside, opened one. 2 soldiers inhaled tabun vapor and died within minutes. The Soviets called in chemical warfare experts, who identified the gas as tabun and sealed the bunker with concrete. It was the first time Allied forces encountered Nazi nerve gas. By April 1945, Germany was collapsing. SS units were ordered to blow up bunkers holding tabun and sarin to prevent capture. On April 12th, a bunker near Hamburg exploded, sending a cloud of tabun gas over a nearby village. 12 civilians died, and 40 more were hospitalized with nerve gas symptoms. The Allies, meanwhile, sent chemical weapons teams to secure German chemical facilities. On April 15th, U.S. Army Rangers captured the Spandau sarin plant. They found 500 tons of sarin stored in steel drums, each labeled insecticide. The Rangers didn't know what they'd found until a German scientist, fearing execution, confessed to its true nature. By May 8, 1945, Germany's unconditional surrender. Most tabun and sarin had been destroyed or captured, but traces remained. In 1946, a Polish farmer plowing his field near Dyrenforth uncovered a cache of tabun shells. 3 people died before the area was cordoned off. The full scope of Program 9 emerged slowly after the war. Allied investigators from the Nuremberg trials interviewed surviving scientists, soldiers, and prisoners. They learned that 3,000 concentration camp prisoners had died directly from tabun exposure or accidents at Dyrenforth and Spandau. Another 10,000 had been injured, many left with permanent disabilities. IG Farben executives claimed they'd been forced to produce tabun under threat of death, but documents revealed they'd actively lobbied the CW service for more contracts. Gerhard Schrader, the inventor of tabun, was arrested but never charged with war crimes. He argued that he developed a chemical for insecticides, not warfare, a defense it held, as there was no proof he'd advocated for its military use. He later worked for the West German government, helping develop nerve gas antidotes until his retirement in 1962. Major General Walter Schnell was tried at Nuremberg in 1946 on charges of crimes against humanity. Prosecutors presented evidence that he'd ordered the use of forced labor at Dierenfurth and ignored safety protocols that killed workers. Schnell testified that he'd only followed Hitler's orders, but the court rejected his defense. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He was paroled in 1956 after serving 10 years and died in 1961 in a small town in Bavaria. Few people attended his funeral. The technical legacy of Tabun was both profound and terrifying. It introduced the world to nerve agents, a class of weapons that would dominate chemical warfare policy for decades. The U.S. military, impressed by Tabun's effectiveness, launched its own nerve gas program in 1946, synthesizing sarin in 1948 and Tabun in 1950. The Soviet Union, which captured Dierenfurth's production records, developed even deadlier nerve gases like Vex, 10 times more toxic than Tabun. But Tabun also inspired global action to ban chemical weapons. The 1925 Geneva Protocol, which prohibited the use of chemical and biological weapons, was strengthened in 1993 with the Chemical Weapons Convention, CWC, signed by 193 countries. The CWC banned production, stockpiling, and use of nerve agents and established a system to verify destruction. By 2023, 98% of the world's declared chemical weapons had been destroyed. For the German soldiers and prisoners who lived with the Bund, the trauma lingered. Eric Weber was captured by U.S. forces in May 1945 and interrogated about Dierenfurth. He was released in 1946, but never fully recovered. He suffered from panic attacks and avoided chemicals of any kind, even household cleaners. He worked as a gardener in Berlin, growing vegetables without pesticides. In a 1985 interview with a German historical magazine, he said, "I still check my hands before I eat. I still smell the air when it's quiet, waiting for something I can't name. That gas doesn't leave you. It's in your memories. It's in your bones." Hans Muller, the private who wrote about sleeping with his gas mask, survived the war and emigrated to Canada in 1950. He worked as a mechanic and never spoke about his service until 1990, when he testified at a trial of a former SS guard from Dierenfurth. Muller described a fear that permeated every aspect of life at the bunker: the way guards avoided touching the Tabun drums, the way they'd rush to put on their masks if a vent hissed, the way no one talked about the prisoners who disappeared after accidents. "We were all prisoners," he told the court. "Some of us wore uniforms. Some wore stripes. But we all feared the same thing, the gas." Today, Tabun exists only in secure laboratories, used to develop better antidotes and detection equipment. The Dierenfurth plant is a memorial, its rusted reactors and lead-line bunkers preserved as a warning. A plaque at the entrance reads, "Here, Nazi Germany produced a Bund, a weapon of mass destruction that killed thousands of prisoners and terrified even its creators. May this site remind us that progress without morality is a curse." The bunker near Breslau, where Soviet soldiers died, is marked with a stone monument honoring their sacrifice. The lesson of Tabun is simple but stark. Some weapons are so terrible that even those who build them fear them. It was a weapon born of desperation, designed to win a war Germany was already losing. It promised victory but delivered only suffering. for prisoners, for soldiers, for civilians caught in its path. It was a reminder that innovation without ethics is not progress. It is destruction. On March 12, 2024, the 80th anniversary of Eric Weber's first Bund test, a small group of survivors, historians, and chemical weapons experts gathered at Dyrenforth. They unveiled a new monument, a glass case containing a single empty Bund drum, surrounded by the names of the prisoners who died making the gas. Dr. Amelija Nazevic, a chemical weapons expert from the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, spoke at the ceremony. Bund did not win the war for Germany, she said, but it did win something else. It won a global commitment to never let such weapons be used again. This site is not just a memorial to the past. It is a promise to the future. We will not forget. We will not repeat. The Nazi nerve gas that terrified German soldiers was never used in combat. It was a weapon of last resort, abandoned when its creators realized its horror. But its legacy lives on, in the treaties that banned chemical weapons, in the antidotes that save lives, and in the memories of those who witnessed its power. It was a weapon that even the Nazis feared, a death in liquid form that taught the world a painful lesson. Some tools are better left unused. For Eric Weber, Hans Muller, and the thousands who touched the Bund, that lesson was written in fear. For the rest of the world, it is written in the laws that prevent such horror from happening again. The gas is gone. The fear is not. And neither is the promise to do better.